What's going on, guys? Lucas here from Skyready RC. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking you through the rest of the Proton-R build. Yesterday we did the frame, kind of took an overview, first look kind of video. Today we're going to do the rest of the build for you. I'm going to go through all the components that I like to use in my racing frames, and we'll get started with the motors here. So I run the T-Motor F40 Pro 2s. I also run the Pro 3s on my other build. On this build, I'm going to be using the F40 Pro 2s just because I took them out of my old race frame. And you can see I've already got some components soldered to it. I have the race wire there already soldered up, so that's what I use for motors. ESC will be the Hobbywing 45 amp 4-in-1. I love this speed control. It's been really reliable for me. It's probably one of my most favorite 4-in-1 ESCs. Flight controller is going to be the Hobbywing G2 F4 flight controller, and you can see once again I've already got some components soldered to it, and this is because I took them off of, essentially I took the guts out of my old race frame and I'm swapping it over to the Proton-R. Alright, so video transmitter, I use the TBS Nano, the Unify Nano, and I have it double-sided taped to just a kind of a board there that mounts on top of the flight controller, and just a short 5 centimeter UFL to SMA. The camera I like to use is the Runcam Micro Swift 3. See that there? So the Micro Swift 3, I really like that camera. It's a CCD camera. It's one of the older sensor cameras, but I do prefer that image over CMOS. I find the CMOS image to be too pixelated, too distracting. I just like the softer image of the CCD cameras. And this one also has the UART camera control, so you can change settings through your flight controller without ever having to plug anything into the camera. You just wire that into a separate UART on your flight controller. So I like that feature about it as well. And also, one thing to note, this is actually the V2 version of the Micro Swift 3, and the main difference here is that it has a much stronger case than the Micro Swift 2 and before. It has kind of a all-enclosed case there. It doesn't wrap around the back like the Racer and some of the others do, but this case is much more durable than the Micro Swift 2 case. That's another reason why I like the Micro Swift 3 V2. Alright, so we went through motors, we went through speed control, flight controller, camera, VTX, and antenna. By far the best antenna to use for racing, the Luminaire Axis Stubby. I love the video signal on these, not too heavy, very nice form factor, won't get in the way of anything if you hit a gate. So that's what I run on all my race builds. And I am running Spectrum. I run the Spectrum race receiver with diversity. And I made a nice little mount here, because if you notice, the Proton-R frame and as well as the Neutron-R frames, they have kind of a gap under here beneath the nucleus plate. So just to save a little bit of room, I make a kind of a custom-made Lexan plate. It's polycarbonate Lexan. It's the same thing RC car bodies are made out of. And I just mount the receiver to the underside of that. I run my antennas down under the nucleus plate and out the side. So you can see, once that's in there like that, I still have all the room I need to mount the stack and everything. So the 4-in-1, the flight controller, and the VTX and whatever else I need to mount up there. I still have all that room, but I have my receiver down under that Lexan plate there, and you can see there's still enough room to put a battery strap. So that's nice. It saves a lot of space. In these race frames, it can get kind of tight, so I like to do that with my receiver. And I also have a little cutout down here, as you can see, for the receiver plug to come out and connect to the flight controller. So that's my first step with the Proton-R. My next step will be to mount the T-Motor F40 Pro 2s. And once again, you can see I already have the race wire installed on those because I took it out of my previous build. And I like to use 3M double-sided Scotch tape to put under the race wire. It's the perfect width for the race wire mini. So I just cut a strip wide enough to go under the race wire, and I don't have to worry about cutting it twice. I just cut once down the length of it. So I get a piece just about that big, and then I'll mount to the bottom of the race wire. And if you guys have never used race wire before, it's really important to put some kind of insulation between the race wire and the carbon because it is conductive. That's why I like to use 3M tape. So I'll just kind of trim the excess off here. And this is the darker 3M tape, so it's called extreme mounting tape. So this is the stickiest 3M double-sided tape that they make. It really works well, and I can still remove it afterwards if I need to service a motor or what have you. Another cool feature I like of this frame, it only has 3 motor mounting holes. So it saves a little bit of weight by not having to put that 4th screw in there, but it still mounts your motor securely. You don't have to worry about any kind of breakage from not using that 4th screw. So I'll get that first motor on there. And these are 5mm arms, so I do use 8mm motor screws. So that way 3mm are protruding past the carbon. And it's just enough to get threads into the base of the motor without coming past and worrying about, getting into your windings and damaging a motor that way. So usually a good rule of thumb is to use 3mm longer screw than you have of your arm thickness. So this is a 5mm arm, I use 8mm screws. So I'll kind of still leave that a little bit loose there. Then I'll peel off the backing of the 3M tape on the race wire mini. And as you can see there, the arms are just wide enough to accommodate that race wire. It makes for a nice clean finish. There's nothing hanging over the side. So that's a really clean finish there with race wire mini on the Proton-R arms. Alright, now we have our motors installed. Now we can get started with the stack. I like to use 20mm stack screws for this particular build. I like to use complete screws instead of the plastic standoffs. I find that a screw going all the way through is much more durable. So we'll thread these into the bottom of the nucleus plate. And it's very nice because the bottom carbon plate has holes for the screw to go all the way through, so you don't have to actually take the bottom plate off to remove a stack screw or to service the stack. You can see the screw head goes all the way through the carbon there. Now I've got my stack screws in. The next thing I like to do in order to build this particular stack, the Hobbywing stack, is I put one standoff nut underneath everything. And that's just to kind of space it away from this little plate that I've made. I don't want any kind of flex in the flight controller or speed control gummies right there to kind of flex into the bottom, so that's why I'm using these little spacers here. And these are nylon, so we don't want to tighten them down too much. You just kind of want to get them hand tight. And I have thread locked the stack screws because it's going into the aluminum here. So anytime you have a steel on steel connection where you're screwing something into steel or aluminum, you always want to use just a drop of thread lock. And a quick reminder, if you have brand new screws, you want to make sure and clean those off with some contact cleaner or electric motor spray, something like this. WD-40 makes this contact cleaner spray. Works really well for removing machine oil off of screws. So I do that to all my new screws. That way the thread lock does its job properly when you apply it. Alright, so next step is to just slide the 4-in-1 down. You can see there's a little bit of space under there. I just like to err on the safe side and make sure nothing is going to touch that bottom under that speed control. So next I'll do the motor wires. So I'm just taking some extra motor wire I had laying around here. I'll strip the motor wire. Then I will tin it. We don't want to put a bunch of solder on it, we just want to get it nice and coated. Just like that. And I like to start with the ESC. I like to solder the wire to the speed control first, and then I'll kind of get down into the race wire last. So when I do this, I'll kind of go from the ESC and then go inside, and then I'll loop it around. I don't like to have wires coming out this way, so I like to solder my ESC wires like this. That way they're nice and protected. It makes it look really clean, really nice. So I'll wrap that one around to the inside there instead of going, say, out this way and connecting them that way, because if you do that, it's just more chance of having a propeller from another quad come and clip it, or you crash into a gate and it snaps the wire somehow. So I like to keep it inside. I like to keep it nice and neat and protected. So then what I'll do is I'll kind of just measure the wire with my finger. So I'll hold it down just so it has a little bit of slack, and then I'll put an indentation in the wire with my fingernail. That way I know where to cut the wire for the race wire. And then I'll do the same thing on this end. I'll strip back just a little bit. Then I'll tin the wire just like I did with the ESC side, not too much solder. And just a little tip for soldering, any kind of soldering you're doing, I like to clean the iron off after every time I use the solder. It makes for a cleaner joint. You don't get kind of rough joints. So nice and shiny joints there. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of those motor wires right now. Our motor wires are installed. I went ahead and also connected the receiver plug down there. that guy there. So now we can put the rest of the stack together. Flight controller just slides on like that. And I do actually use these plastic standoffs here, only on the top row, just so we can mount this little board here. So we can mount that guy. The VTX is double-sided taped under there. And I like to do that because I don't like having anything on top to kind of get smashed by the canopy or the top plate if it breaks. So that's why, another reason why I put my receiver down there where the nucleus plate is. So I'll go ahead and install these 4 plastic standoffs here. And one thing to note about flight controllers with soft mount gummies, you want to make sure not to tighten whatever on top of it is all the way down. You just want to get it snug, and the reason for that is you don't want to smash the gummies because the flight controller, your whole stack basically relies on those gummies for insulation against vibration, and that prevents gyro noise, video noise. It's just better if you don't smash those down. So you want to get them just hand tight. Just like that. So the VTX plate, then it slides right over those standoffs, nice and clean. And then I will put my wiring harness on from the 4-in-1 into the flight controller. That just pushes in like so. And the next step I'll do is go ahead and install the power wires onto the 4-in-1. And I'm going to go ahead and re-tin these just a little bit. They need just a little bit more solder. And I like to run my battery lead straight out the back, and I'll kind of just run it along the arm like that. And then I'll run a zip tie right here, and I'll zip tie it under the wires, of course, because you don't want to press down on those wires. So there's a nice little space right there for a zip tie. That's kind of how I run my battery lead. So I'll finish up with the positive right here. Nice and clean. So I'm not going to zip tie that just yet. What I'll do next is install the capacitor. Now capacitor is very important, especially for the hobby wing. It even says on the box to use the 4S or 6S capacitor. It actually comes with two capacitors, and it says on the box to use the smaller one for 4S and the bigger one for 6S, and that is a necessity. I'm actually going to mount this with a 3D printed capacitor holder which slides over the rear standoff. Very nice and clean. So I'll just slide that down there. I'll get it as low as I can without actually touching the motor wires there. So I'll leave a little bit of room. And then what I'll do is I'll orient the capacitor with the negative facing the front. And I'll just slide it in the mount. Like so. And what I like to do to attach that, to connect it to the battery, positive and negative, I like to use two little pieces of 20 gauge motor wire. It's the same stuff that I use to connect my race wire to the speed control. Same stuff, I'll use two little pieces of that. I'm actually reusing these, so I'm going to re-tin these just a little bit to make them a little bit neater. And I'll go ahead and install them on the 4-in-1 first. Makes it quite a bit easier. So that's tacked on right now. I'm just going to go back with the pliers, apply just a bit of pressure, and get it to seat down nice and clean. Alright, so now I've got the canopy off. It's time to install our camera and also mount the antenna with the included TPU antenna mount. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do the antenna mount first. We'll just slide it over the standoffs. Like so. Now I'm going to install the camera into the canopy. And I like to use washers on my camera screws so the screw doesn't push through the canopy or the 3D printed mount. Just a little bit of extra security. So that's on there now. We'll go ahead and connect the camera. Camera's connected. Slide down the canopy. Bummer. So I was afraid of this, guys. I was afraid that I would run into this issue because I ran into the same issue on my other Proton frame. This guy with the top plate, I actually had to remove my camera plug. You can see in there, there's no, right here, there's no camera plug. I had to solder the wires directly to the camera. So there's not very much space in there for a camera. I know some of the new CMOS cameras, you can flip the camera upside down and flip the image. Unfortunately, I can't do that with the MicroSwift 3, so I'm going to have to remove that plug once again with the canopy. I'll give you a closer look at that. So you can see that camera plug right up against those wires there. I'm not a huge fan of frames with no space like that. I think that's my only complaint about this frame. I love everything else about it, but you can see that's not going to work. As soon as I hit something, especially with this flexible TPU canopy, that's going to break the camera off right there. So I'll be back. I got to pull that plug off and solder the wires to the camera. Okay, I got the camera plug off. I got the wires soldered to the camera. You can see right there. I had to use tweezers to do it, guys. Tweezers. I hope none of you ever have to do that. So hopefully you have a camera that you can flip upside down. I didn't. I really like this camera, so I wasn't going to change camera, so I was forced to take the plug off the back and solder the individual wires to the camera board. Man, not fun. So now we can get on with the build. I like to use this little side protector here to cover those stack wires. This is made out of Lexan as well, just clear polycarbonate Lexan. I cut a sheet to size. I use a body reamer like this to make the holes, and then I kind of just bend the edge down like that so it's a 90-degree angle. Slide it over the top, and everything's protected right there. Prop strike, gate, nothing's going to get in there. So I like to run that. It's really easy to make. I think Lexan sheet, you get a big old 2 foot by 1 foot section or something like that for a couple bucks. So now I'm going to put the camera in the canopy. Line it up here. And we'll seat the canopy on the front standoffs, and you can see now we don't have any issue in there with the camera contacting the stack. We have plenty of room. Unfortunately, we had to remove the camera plug to do so. Alright, so now I'll put my zip ties on the arms here for the antennas. So I like to do a zip tie here and a zip tie here, and they'll come out forward. And once again, I'll go under the motor wires right there. I'll go under those. And then I'll take some heat shrink. kind of bend the antenna just so it follows a nicer path along the zip tie. And I will measure to the end of the antenna, cut the zip tie there. Then I'll add my heat shrink. So they'll kind of look like that when it's all done. They're out of the way, the props can't get to them. They don't really ever move up or down because they're so light. So they're nice, clean, out of the way. I think I like this better than having the antennas come up out the back or off of the canopy, because they can definitely get chopped that way. They like to be pushed down into the prop that way if you hit a gate or if you land upside down. So I definitely like the antennas on the arms better. Quite a bit more durable. So I'll do my second one here. And once again, I'll bend the antenna so it kind of follows the zip tie a little bit better. That way I can measure the zip tie and see how much I need to cut off of it. So right about there. And I'll add my heat shrink. So just like that, antennas are on there now. Nice safe position away from the props. And also another thing to mention with this setup, you get coverage almost everywhere your drone is facing. So because of the angle of the antennas here, they're coming out away from the arms. You'll have signal coming this way, this way, this way. Pretty much any way you orient the drone, you'll always have signal. So I think it's a little bit better than having the antennas come just straight out the top or out of the canopy like that, just for better signal penetration. It's I've never had any problems mounting the antennas like this. So last step here, we'll do the zip tie for the XT60 lead. And again, we'll run it under the motor wires. That way we don't have any stress on the motor wires. No failures that way. So just like that, that's how I like to run my XT60, coming out the side, pointing towards the front there. Trim that off. And now we can add our screws to tighten down the canopy. In the back, I like to use 3x10s. And the fronts require 3x8 just because of this particular version. It has the standoff in here. These are 10mm standoffs. So remember, we have a screw coming in from the bottom and from the top. So I use a 3x8 on the bottom and a 3x8 on the top for the front. just the right size. Alright, so the last thing to do is add our antenna. So we just need to tighten down this SMA. Then we'll add our stubby. Alright, so there you have it. Fully completed Proton-R. This is the canopy version. Nice clean build, nice clean install. I'll kind of compare it to the top plate version here for you real quick. So top plate version, I bought this before I bought the canopy version. I liked the top plate version so much, I wanted to try another one, and I figured why not try the canopy. It looks very cool. I'm not quite sure how well the TPU is going to do in a crash though, because it's pretty flexible. So you can see right there. I'm barely pressing down on it and it's touching the stack there, so we'll see how that fares. But yeah, there it is, guys. Proton-R with the canopy, Proton-R with the top plate. They both have the air bender installed, you can see, for turtle mode right there. And I'll kind of go through the equipment for you once again. This is what I run. These are my personal builds here. So I run the Hobbywing G2 stack, F4 flight controller, and 45 amp 32-bit speed control. I run the TBS Unified Nano video transmitter. I run the Microswift 3 V2 camera. I run T-Motor F40 Pro 3 2400 kV on 4S. I run the Lumineer Axis stubby antennas. I love these antennas. You can see on this one, it has almost no kind of markings left on it. I've ran this antenna for almost 2 years now with no problems, no cracks, no video issues. Video is crystal clear. So I think those are the best antenna to run for racing. This guy comes in right at 307 grams with the top plate. I'm going to weigh this guy later. I don't have a scale handy right now, but that's the equipment that I use on my Proton-Rs. Also guys, I will have links in the video description below for all the equipment that I've listed here. You can find that at skyredrc.com. If you guys want to build something similar to these, you can find all that equipment there. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.